Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we're going to talk about some Sly Flourish news and look at some fun stuff. My friend Joe at Inkwell Ideas has signed Sly Flourish Books at Gencon at booth 150. I'm going to talk about, and he's showing off his new Hexploration deck, which I'm going to show off a little bit today. I got a set right here. There's a new Stranger Things D&D Eddie Munson starter set coming out in October from Wizards of the Coast. Who is that for? Who's that product? Who's that for? Who wants that? We're going to talk about that. There is now an official D&D Cthulhu supplement up on D&D Beyond. We're going to talk about kind of the interesting thoughts about having all of these different IP that are connected to D&D on D&D Beyond. I now have firsthand experience running a Lich. Running a Lich is always kind of one of my benchmarks for running D&D and 5e games and things like that. And now I have run the D&D 2025 Monster Manual Lich, and I want to share my experiences. And we're going to cover more questions from the Patreon Q&A all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm your pal, Mike Shea, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing games. Last week on Sly Flourish, both on the Sly Flourish newsletter and on the Sly Flourish website, I published the article Prep 3 Quests. This is talking about the importance of having 3 quests that your characters can go on in the next game that you are going to run. Where are they going to head next? Kind of prepping those a bit early and making sure that you have some ideas that you can drop in front of your players so you can kind of make sure that you're paving the path that is coming out in front of them. You can find that article on Sly Flourish, and you can, of course, find future articles by subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. Next week's article is 10 easy heist encounters. This is a fun, short list of heist encounters, things that can happen while you're engaged in the middle of a heist, while you're kind of breaking into either infiltrating an area or going on a heist, and things that can happen there. Fun events, including a bonus list of 10 things in the goblin's pot. Because one of them is a goblin stumbles through struggling with the big pot. And it's like, well, what's in the pot? And then we have 10 things that are inside the pot. Really fun. This is sort of a fun exercise we did on the Discord server a long time ago. I wrote it up in a quick article, and now that article is coming out next week. Best way to get that article is to subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. Totally free to sign up. You get articles like this. It's totally worth doing. Next week on the Patreon, I am doing I'm releasing the 12th of 15 scenarios for the Key of Worlds arc for the City of Arches. In the City of Arches book, there is a campaign outline for a campaign called the Key of Worlds. I actually ran that entire campaign for my home group, and I have been writing up larger scenarios. They're not exactly adventures. They're not full published adventures where everything is listed out. They are toolkits, sort of scenario and adventure toolkits that help you build out each one of the major arcs of the Key of Worlds. And the next one that we are doing is the Endless Warrens, which is one of the 3 paths. This is actually the path I did not run, because you're intended to run 2 of 3 paths. And I ran 3 paths. I ran the other 2 paths. So that's why this is like the 12th scenario instead of like the 6th or whatever it is. So in the Endless Warrens scenario, this is very much like a Fistful of Dollars, Sanjuro, Yojimbo style adventure where there are 2 warring groups that are fighting over a common area, a common sort of artifact, and you get to decide which one of the groups that you are going to support among the other. Are you going to betray one over the other? Are you going to work the 2 of them against each other? There's sort of this fun melting pot of these 2 groups. The 2 groups are a bunch of monsters and brutal humanoids that follow a fire giant, and a bunch of rat folk and other fairy and fae type creatures that follow a fae creature that has come through the path. And the 2 of them are fighting against each other for this common powerful artifact, a megalith known as Tonavin's Walk. Each of the 2 leaders have information that the characters need in order to get to the next part of the scenario, which is getting to Dragon's Reach. Dragon's Reach is sort of the second stage of the 3 stages, getting to the Brazier of the Nameless King. So this is the first of 3 scenarios that take you to the Brazier of the Nameless King. Broken out, and it's got your various kind of starts, different ways that you can get in here. Each one of these is runnable as an independent adventure. You don't have to run it as part of the scenario. You can have other reasons while you're there. It's got secrets and clues. It's got key NPCs. It's got the encounters that you might run into there. It has descriptions of the locations, 2 different major locations. One's called the Guardians, which is an old dwarven settlement. The other one is called Sulin's Grotto. That is sort of an old temple to the goddess Sulin that has been taken over by the fairy folk that are there. Each one of those has encounters. Sulin's Grotto also has traps and hazards. We then describe what's the scenario that could kind of take people on the path. and then also treasure that you might pick up there, and then the next stage. So this is kind of the common format, very short, 5 pages, right? Includes a VTT version of the Dyson map that I'm using in this, the 2 Dyson maps. So we have VTT versions of both of those maps so that you can run it in a virtual tabletop of your choice. This, of course, is available to patrons. This is exclusively available to Hero Tier patrons of Sly Flourish. Hero Tier patrons get access to all of these scenarios. This is the 12th. There are 3 more to go before the entire arc of the Key of Worlds has these 15 different scenarios. So quite a bit of material. I mean, it's a lot of stuff for that whole. If you like the City of Arches and you want to have like a deeper dive into the campaign path of the Key of Worlds, which is a really fun campaign path. 15 individual scenarios that fill out that whole thing. So really fun to write. I love writing these things. Fun to play. Like, these are based a lot of times on my own personal experience running them. I really like that, how that's going. Another tool available to patrons of Sly Flourish is the 5e Artisanal Database. I've been showing off various tools from the 5e Artisanal Database. This is it's built for 5th edition games, but includes rule sets from D&D 2014, 2024, Tales of the Valiant, and Level Up Advanced 5e, all of the stuff that they released in Creative Commons licenses. Now the whole thing is Creative Commons because Black Flag is now under Creative Commons. That's the Tales of the Valiant scenario. So it includes databases of monster spells and magic items. It also includes a bunch of tools, one of which I wanted to show right now, and that is the Token Maker. The Token Maker, one important thing about the 5e Artisanal Database is the entire thing is downloadable. You can download the entire database and run it in a browser on your desktop machine locally. You do not need to reach off to a server and hope that that server stays up for all time. Instead, you can download the whole thing, have your own copy of it, and know that you have things like this Token Maker available to you whenever you need it on your local machine, instead of having to hope that you can reach the internet and stuff like that. So lots of different tools, but the one we're going to look at today is the Token Maker. So very, very simple. This is a tool. A lot of the tools that are in here are tools that I'm like, this is something I need, right? I need a tool. And today we're actually going to show off the Token Maker with City of Arches. So in the City of Arches, for example, we have this super villain named Abraxas of Chul. There's actually a stat block for Abraxas as a challenge rating 26 demon prince. And let's say we want to make a token of him and you want to just pull it directly out of the art. So in this case, I'm going to grab a big chunk of it as a screenshot and save that to my desktop. And then in my area here, I am going to choose a file. I'm going to go to my desktop where I grab that screenshot and it drops it in there. And I can zoom it in so that I can make a good token. For the ring, you can pick any color you want. We'll make like let's see, do we want it to be light green, dark green? We'll do light green so it looks kind of nice, right? And then you say generate token, bang. And it saves the token to your downloads directory. No information is sent to the server. It is all happening internally in your browser. I have a little thing here. So like if you're ever, from a privacy, you should always be worried about like image privacy and stuff like that. Although for tokens, I don't know if it's that big a deal, but I can tell you that this is all happening locally in your browser. Nothing is sent to a server. There is no server side calculation on this, which is why you're able to download the whole thing to your own desktop and run it there. And after having done that, let's see, we'll make a new window. Here's a new window, and bang, there is the token. This has, even though it's showing it in a square of the gray, it is actually a transparent background, so you can drop it onto your virtual tabletop however you want. So that is a very, very simple token generator built for the 5e Artisanal Database, completely standalone, completely downloadable, and works in your system, along with many, many other cool tools, dice rollers, encounter calculators, combat trackers, monster stats, map annotators, and more that are available in the 5e Artisanal Database, which is available to all patrons of Sly Flourish. If you are a paying member of Sly Flourish, of the Sly Flourish Patreon, you have access to the 5e Artisanal Database. I'm still tweaking things every week and putting up new versions constantly, so it's really cool. So check that out. My friend Joe at Inkwell Ideas makes really awesome stuff. He is the creator of the Worldographer, a long-standing piece of software that helps you generate overland hex maps and city maps and even dungeon maps from random and pseudo-random kind of stuff. He also creates lots of different physical products, and his most recent physical product that he makes is the Hexploration deck. The Hexploration deck, and this is, I got a Hexploration kit. He gave me a preview copy of the whole kit that includes the Hexploration cards themselves. There's a whole pile of these, both desert themed and mountain themed, different kind of colors and things like that. Each one of these is sort of, as he describes it, sort of driver license-like in its construction. and it allows you to draw on it with wet and dry erase. But particularly cool, it also includes a whole set of Klingons. These are like static Kling little details that you can add onto your hex maps. Really fun way to build out a location. And that is brought together with the hex decks. The hex decks include each deck. There are 5 decks in the pack. They have 40 cards that include artwork on one side that show an interesting location, and then a bunch of information on the back to help you kind of generate interesting encounters or situations going on at each of these events. Beautiful artwork. The art on the hex pieces themselves are done by Dyson, and different artists did the art here, but beautiful cards. Really, really cool. Along with like different sort of cards for handling random locations, lost civilizations, hidden tombs, and other things like this. Really, really fun stuff. He is going to be showing this off at booth 150 at Gencon. If you are at Gencon this coming weekend, and you go in the main entrance to the vendor hall and go along the left side wall as you're looking from the main entrance, you can get to Gencon booth 150, which is the Inkwell Ideas booth. And also available at the Inkwell Ideas booth are signed copies of my books, including Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, The City of Arches, and The Lazy DM's Companion. So if you would like to pick up signed copies of my books, you can get them there. I will not be at Gencon, but you can tell Joe that I say hello when you go and visit Gencon booth 150 and take a look at the Hexploration hexes, the Hexploration kit, the Kling, the static Kling stickers and everything else. Really, really fun. One little trick. I just noticed this while I was playing with this before the show. I have a neoprene mat underneath my keyboard that I use for my keyboard and mouse. Kind of like it's not like a slick mat. It's got kind of that rubbery texture. And when I was putting these cards down on it, they stay in place really well. They kind of like almost stick in place. They're not actually sticking, but they won't slide around. And so you can sort of set up your own environment with this and know that they're going to stay in place and even draw on them without having them move. So that was kind of a neat trick of like, oh yeah, this mat is actually a really great way to place these things down and know that they stay in place. So really fun stuff, really cool way. We were looking at this at my last Sunday game, and really neat stuff. So check that out. That is the Hexploration, in this case, the Hexploration kit, which includes 5 decks, High Seas, Wilderness, Underrealms, 40 cards with 10 trait cards in each deck. Dyson drawn map tiles, 80 tiles that are double-sided. One side has kind of a general blank side. The other side has more details on it. They're not details that are so tight that you can't use them for lots of different things. And then the static Kling stickers, which can add details onto these. So a really fun way to show off a map. Very, very cool. Anyway, if you were going to Gen Con, go to booth 150, say hello to Joe over at Inkwell Ideas, and check out both the signed Sly Flourish books and the new Hexploration kit. Very neat. Let's see. So a new product was announced. There was kind of like a mystery product that had been on the roster for Wizards of the Coast for this year, for 2025, and we didn't know what it was. And it finally was described. That new product is the Hellfire Club Stranger Things D&D tie-in. It is a box set that includes a whole bunch of different stuff, maps, a DM screen, different adventures that are kind of in the classic style, character sheets that are done in the old blues style from that time. It's got character stands. It actually looks like a lot of the material or similar kind of material to that we saw in the D&D starter set. So it looked pretty interesting. The question is, who is this for? I was reading through, there are 15 pages of comments on EN World of people talking about this box set. And a common thing that I saw over and over again was, well, I don't really want this. Like this, some people are like, I don't really watch Stranger Things, or I don't really want like thematic stuff like this, and it felt like there was a fair bit of angst about this product and why it wasn't the product for you. And the answer is, it isn't for you. This is not a product made for us. We're already in the hobby. We're already here. I'm surrounded by stuff. I already own, I think, 3 to 4 copies of the D&D 2024 core books, right? I am deep in this hobby. A tie-in product like this isn't intended as something that somebody already in the hobby wants to get onto. Doesn't mean that we won't buy it, or that if you really like Stranger Things and you want to try it out, that you wouldn't try it out, or that it's even necessarily like it might be a good product for you to introduce your friends who are familiar with Stranger Things into the world of D&D. So you might use it as your sort of gateway to say, hey, did you like Stranger Things? That's great. I have a Stranger Things box set. We could actually play some D&D just like Eddie Munson and the kids did in Stranger Things. And we could play and you can see what it's like. But probably you could just do the starter set and do that. You probably don't need the Stranger Things box set. This is a tie-in product. This gets into that whole concept of like, well, what is a D&D franchise look like? And people bristle at that. Oh, this is just another D&D cash grab. You know, there's a lot of like things. It isn't for you, man. This is exactly, in my opinion, what Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast should be doing, which is branching D&D out outside of the bounds of the people who already understand what role-playing games are, who have already been playing role-playing games, who are, you know, either watching like live play games or you know, having brought, you know, gone from video games into the world of D&D. This isn't for people who are already in D&D. This is to bring the concepts of D&D out to people who may have little experience other than, wow, I saw the kids playing in the show. There's lots of little nitpicky things we could do. Like, isn't this like 2 years too late? Because I thought the whole Eddie Munson D&D thing happened in the previous season, not now. And I don't want to spoil Stranger Things. It doesn't exactly seem super appropriate that this thing comes out at this point in the storyline for City of Arches, for Stranger Things. But hey, whatever, right? Like I'm not in charge of the operations side of Wizards of the Coast. That's up to them. But my point is that like this is, when I talk about, and I've talked about this on the show before, of like what is Wizards of the Coast's role in the TTRPG hobby? For us, not for them. I get a lot of people who talk about the business. They talk about, oh, well, this is important to their business for X, Y, or Z, or this is how they do whatever. I don't care, right? I don't care what the business of D&D is, right? I care. I mean, and this is where we got into like RPG business punditry is its own hobby, which is cool. Like, friend Scipio, who I think is here, has spent a tremendous amount of energy and really interesting looking at the quarterly earnings reports that Hasbro is putting out in order to be able to dissect like how well is D&D doing as a brand. Very cool, right? And it's a really interesting thing. It also doesn't directly affect you in the game that you're going to be running next, or the friends that you're going to be able to bring to that table to run the game. So I'm not discounting that as a fun kind of hobby to enjoy, but it also doesn't matter to the games that we're actually running. So when I think about it, I try to think about like, what can Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast do that helps the entire RPG hobby for all of us? What can strengthen that hobby? And I will say they have done a lot of really good things in the past 2 years. I really feel like since, and then people argue and they'll bring up Pinkertons and they'll bring up AI art and Big B's and they'll bring up other stuff. I know, I hear you, I get it. But I argue that since the OGL catastrophe and since putting the 5.1 SRD out under a Creative Commons license, in my opinion, pretty much everything that they have done has improved and expanded the larger RPG hobby. I have lots of examples. Putting out the 5.1 SRD in multiple languages, putting out the 5.2 SRD in Creative Commons, putting out the new core books and all the functions, both in physical book form and on virtual tabletops that actually compete with D&D Beyond, like Roll20 and Foundry and Fantasy Grounds. Putting it out on Foundry in particular was a really good feature. Putting out a starter set, which isn't out yet, but the starter set's coming out. Now we know a lot more about the starter set. That's still a physical box that you can buy and own forever, rather than saying, oh no, you want to learn about D&D? Come to D&D Beyond, sign up on our website, and you can learn all about it there. And we're not going to bother to make physical products anymore, right? They're still making physical products. When I talk about the Ulysses Pact, a physical book is a Ulysses Pact. Once you buy it, you own it. They can never take it from you. Once you buy that D&D starter set, they can't take it back. They can't change things and make it so that starter set doesn't work anymore. That starter set still always works. That is, to me, a physical, publishing physical books is still very much the Ulysses Pact that Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast is making with us as D&D fans. The other aspect to what Hasbro and D&D can do to make the hobby better is stuff like this. It's the pinball game. It's the, obviously the licensing of like Baldur's Gate 3. There is a lot of areas where they can take D&D and expand it out into other aspects. I think Baldur's Gate 3, and I have friends who work at PAX, right, or have run D&D games at PAX and have talked about how many new players showed up saying, I played Baldur's Gate 3 and now I want to see what D&D is like at the table. Right? Lots of people. So that example of working with Larian to develop, and obviously this is like a special case because like all the stars aligned perfectly to make Baldur's Gate 3, right? I mean, I'm sure there were problems, but wow, game of the year by far. It was so high as the game of the year that like there wasn't even like a chance another game was going to win. It did so well. And it was so well integrated with the lore of the Forgotten Realms, right? Like how they handled the lore was really, really strong. So it's like if you knew Baldur's Gate 3, you had a really good understanding of the Forgotten Realms and D&D lore and Githyanki and Vlaakith the Lich Queen and Mind Flayers and what's going on with there. So much information that you could get from that. So that was a tremendous draw. And that's really hard to recreate. I think it'll be very, very difficult to recreate that again. You have this sort of regression to the mean problem, where Baldur's Gate 3 is not the average, right? Baldur's Gate 3 is the pinnacle. And getting that again is going to be really tough to do. But my point is that this kind of product, if you look at this and you go, right? If you're that ain't about you. This isn't for you, right? This product's not for you. This product is to bring new people into the hobby. And this is the kind of product I want to see. And I'm hoping we see a lot more stuff like this. And I don't think, like you could argue, oh, it's a cash grab. Guess what? They're a commercial company. They're a publicly traded commercial company. Of course it's a cash grab. That's what it's called. That's what a poor profit company does, is grab cash and find ways to grab cash. The question is, are they grabbing cash in a way that is helping the hobby or not? This is one where I think they are grabbing cash in a way that is helping the hobby. They are putting out a product out there that is tied to a brand. They worked with the brand. They partnered with Netflix and Stranger Things to make it. It's got a Netflix logo on the front of the box. That's great. I'd love to see more stuff like this. I'm really surprised. I was talking about with Michelle on our walk today. It's a real bummer that there isn't a Baldur's Gate 3 box set, right? And now, is it too late? Maybe, right? But it's like the only tie-ins that we had for Baldur's Gate 3 was Descent into Avernus, which was like 2 years too early. And in my opinion, and I've talked about this before, the whole connection between Baldur's Gate and Descent into Avernus kind of wrecked that adventure, frankly, in my mind. And now they keep like putting Baldur's Gate into things in the future, but there was a ripe opportunity of like within that year after Baldur's Gate 3 came out of saying, hey, and we have a Baldur's Gate 3 starter set. If you want to play some of the ideas, the characters from Baldur's Gate in some of the situations, new adventures, but you want to expand upon the adventures that you played in, but do it at the table with your friends, here's the box set. The missed opportunity. The other one that's driving me a little bananas is like, we now have 3 seasons of Vox Machina as a cartoon series on Amazon Prime. And there's no D&D cartoon. There was a D&D cartoon like in the 80s. Where's our D&D cartoon? How come there's no... How is it that Critical Role has one and D&D doesn't? That kind of boggles my mind. I am assuming that the whole idea of getting to a more franchise model may improve that sort of thing. I would love to see it. But I'm mostly here to talk about the Hellfire Club thing and say, if it bothers you that this product is coming out, if you look at it and it's not for you, it's because it's not for you. This is about the expansion of the brand. And that's why I'm interested. I don't know if I'm going to pick it up, right? I don't know if it really interests me that much. I'm always, because I look at it, and again, it's just my opinion, and totally doesn't matter for the product itself. I don't really want adventures about Stranger Things. I want actual adventures. But of course, I get the Keep of the Borderlands box set, which is going to be actual adventures that are built in the world and things going on. And I don't really know what these adventures are like. I just know, like, I don't really need to fight Demodogs and Demogorgons that aren't from the lore of D&D that I already know. You know, other people, on the other hand, that might be exactly the kind of thing that they want to do. So we will see. You know, looks neat, right? And I'm happy that they're doing it. Mostly, when I hear people who are already in the hobby who look at it and don't like it, you're totally free not to like it. Totally free to not be interested in this at all or get all grumpy about it. You get to feel however you want to feel. But I'm telling you, this product is not designed for you. It's designed to bring more people in the hobby, which I think is a very good thing. Also, a new interesting development over on D&D Beyond is the Cthulhu by Torchlight supplement on D&D Beyond. This was actually designed by Mike Mearls, who was the lead designer of the 2014 version of D&D. So we have like a really interesting kind of situation where Mike Mearls worked over at Chaosium and developed a 5e supplement for Cthulhu and the Cthulhu mythos for 5e. And I think it's interesting from a few different angles, which is why I talk about it. I'm not going to talk about I don't talk about every single product that comes out in D&D Beyond or anything new that's like that. But I think this one is interesting because of a bunch of different kind of interesting angles. One is I can't help but be impressed how Wizards of the Coast has done things like bring in new IP to 5e and worked on these licensing deals in order to bring these licenses that were not there. Somebody corrected me. I had originally thought that there was like a lawsuit issue between whoever held on to the Lovecraft Cthulhu mythos and TSR when they had like Nyarlathotep and Cthulhu and other sort of... Are you impressed that I know to say Nyarlathotep? Can you say Nyarlathotep? You should practice it. That, there's all of these different Cthulhu mythos, Lovecraftian named things that used to be in the old Deities and Demigods book. And I thought that there was some legal issue there. Apparently, it wasn't necessarily a legal issue that got them removed, but instead, it was like the Lovecraft group said, we want you to make sure it's clear in your book that that stuff belongs to us and that you're using it with permission. And TSR said, never mind, we'll just take it out. And they instead took out Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep and Yog-Sothoth and the other sort of Lovecraftian IP. So kind of a weird licensing thing, not the same as the Lord of the Rings licensing stuff, in which Balrogs became Balors, Ents became Trents, and Hobbits became Halflings, which was, I believe, lawsuit related or some kind of outside settlement where they changed the names. Gary Gygax changed the names of these things to avoid, legal issues with the Tolkien estate, who said those are proper names of, those are the names of our monsters that are unique to our kind of world. And now we have them that on D&D Beyond, you have Lord of the Rings 5e on D&D Beyond. And now we have Cthulhu on D&D Beyond. So we now have on a D&D website run by Wizards of the Coast has now supplements that are including these IPs from things that they didn't have before, which is really kind of fascinating. What's also fascinating about it is the idea that Mike Mearls, who is the lead designer of D&D 2014, is the developer and is the designer of this particular supplement. So now we have a new supplement from a third-party publisher designed by the same guy who was, working with all the other designers to develop the 2014 version of D&D. That's kind of interesting. Mike Mearls, this is on the EN World. On the EN World article, Mearls actually talks about it. And, I think it's great. He's on the EN World, so you can ask him questions about it. And he brought up some interesting points that were here. And one of which came up, which is this available anywhere else? And this is another angle. And this kind of gets into my I get squinty-eyed. I'm like, D&D Beyond, right? I just talked, so when I was talking about the Stranger Things box set, and I talked about how Wizards of the Coast is doing, in my opinion, a very good job of expanding the total RPG hobby by putting things out in Creative Commons licenses, by making sure their books are available in physical, but also on multiple virtual tabletops and things like that they're doing a lot. The one area where I'm always like, I don't know, is D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond worries me. And I run polls and surveys to kind of help calm myself down to say D&D Beyond is not becoming the focal point of 5e, which is what worries me. It's actually one of the reasons I built the 5e Artisanal the 5e Artisanal database, was to say, can we get D&D Beyond like tools in a way that are legal and available and downloadable, so that you can have them and download them on your own system, and you don't have to trust an external system to remain online. Because in my opinion, Wizards of the Coast has a very bad track record of killing previous systems. As an example, please, if you would, load up your 4th edition character builder up on the Wizards of the Coast website that used to be there. It's not there anymore, right? There's lots of tools that are no longer available, and lots of articles, even including articles by like Mike Mearls and others, that frankly just disappeared. Chris Perkins had a whole series of articles, and yeah, you can go to the archive, and people made PDFs of them. I even have a PDF of a bunch of old Chris Perkins articles that he wrote on the Wizards/D&D website. They're all gone. Right? They just got rid of them. And I remember, I think it was my friend Teos, who was at the summit 2 years ago, was like, what are you going to do with all that stuff? And they're like, what stuff? right? They didn't even they didn't even know they had it all. Wizards of the Coast has a bad habit of killing digital tools. And for that, this is true. This actually happened. I would be worried about the stuff that I buy in D&D Beyond and knowing that it's going to be there over the long term. That's one of the reasons I would love them to release more stuff in PDF. I would love them to release downloadable versions of these products when you buy them so that you actually know you have a copy of this thing and you can have it on your desktop and you can, know and put it in your 3-2-1 backup system and know that you have it regardless of what direction Wizards of the Coast decides to go with D&D in the future or gets bought out. Right? It's not impossible that D&D gets bought out by somebody else. What happens to all that stuff? I don't know, right? Weirder things have happened. It's not inconsistent. So one of the questions that Merle's asked was, is this a digital only product? And he said, yes, it's digital only. And he had a pretty interesting reason, was that when he joined Chaosium and he pitched a Call of Cthulhu / D&D crossover book, the risks that were brought up was that it could be confusing to, I don't know what BRP players are. Somebody have to explain to me what a BRP player is, since they might think that it's a supplement that's directly tied to the Call of Cthulhu system. And, that there's a risk. And I think, that there's a risk that if you put up, what if you have two different Call of Cthulhu books, but they belong to different systems? So that was the risk. And that and so here he says, from my understanding, when Call of Cthulhu D20 released all those years ago, retailers and distributors had trouble keeping the line straight. That people would buy the wrong book and it would have a bunch of rules that were not compatible with the rule set that they were using to run their Cthulhu stuff. So the answer was, because we're publishing it digital only on D&D Beyond, we don't have to worry about that. Anybody that buys it knows that it's part of the 5e stuff. And we don't, basic role-playing. Thank you. BRP is basic role-playing. Thank you for that. It is why it's so nice to hang out with folks on Twitch while I'm doing this, is they can correct me. They can correct me on this. And at least 4 people did. So that's pretty interesting too, that it is digital only. And what does that mean? Well, I mean, not much, right? Does that bother me? I should ask. Not much. I mean, it's a neat product. Is it a critical product for the hobby? Not really. Right? It's cool. It's neat. I haven't really dug into it. Some folks over on the Sly Flourish Discord server dug into it and were digging into the mechanics and talking about various subclasses and things like that, and whether they're good or whether they're not, and comparing them to other subclasses and things. We did let's look at the Cthulhu stat block and let's dissect the Cthulhu stat block a little bit, right? And people had opinions out of it one way or the other. It's a neat thing. Is it critical to the RPG hobby? Not really. Would the hobby fall apart if it disappeared one day? Probably not. I know that if I were Chaosium, though, I would want to make a PDF version of this available on my own site too, right? I would want to, I don't think you have to go through a full print run, right? But I would want to sell a copy. There's no way that I would make a product and put it only up on D&D Beyond and hope that whatever relationship I had to write, which by the way, none of us know exactly, it is not public what kind of license anybody has. I know lots of different publishers have worked with them. I've talked to publishers who say, yes, we're very happy with the relationship we have with Wizards, but we have no idea what that actual relationship is like, what the term limits are, what royalty rate they get. We do know that they are non-exclusive. And I don't expect, so I don't have direct information on this, but I do not expect that they have any kind of exclusive licensing for this. I expect that the fact that it is only on D&D Beyond was Chaosium making that choice, not something that Wizards of the Coast dictate, because they don't dictate that to anybody else. So I don't know why they would dictate that here. So we do know that they are non-exclusive licenses, which is good, which means as a publisher, that means you can publish that same material elsewhere. Many people do. And honestly, if I were a publisher that was up there, I would definitely ensure that I also had it somewhere else and that I was selling it somewhere else. So I think it's kind of interesting. I'm interested in all these kind of angles. It's interesting that there is now Cthulhu mythos content that is sitting right alongside the D&D 2024 core books. It is interesting, and now we have Lord of the Rings as well. You see that there's these different kind of IPs that are connected there. Another sort of angle on this is getting into the RPG business punditry side. Another interesting angle is that Wizards of the Coast had a tremendous boost by having Final Fantasy based Magic cards. I guess the Final Fantasy Magic card business did very well this past quarter. It was something they talked about that it had done really well. So the interesting thing is, are we going to see more crossovers of IP with D&D 2024? And what will that look like? So I don't know if this kind of counts as that crossover, because in this part, they're like, hey, if you're the IP holder, we're going to put it on you to develop the product, but we can put it on D&D Beyond. That is good for Wizards because they don't have to spend a lot of money on it to determine whether it's good. It's good for publishers who have the relationship because they can make a product and put it on D&D Beyond, and they can expose their IP. So it could be really interesting to see, are we going to see further expansions of other IP connected to D&D 2024 through D&D Beyond? That whole thing is kind of interesting to look at. So, but yeah, you can take a look at Cthulhu by Torchlight over on D&D Beyond and check it out. And yeah, interesting thing. I ran a Lich. The Lich is one of my favorite monsters in D&D and D&D lore. And I joke about the fact that I have run a Lich many times in the D&D 2014 rules and never run it right. And some of the reason is that, like, I would forget about things like its lair abilities. I would forget about some of the other stuff that it had, and it just made it difficult to run. On Friday, this past Friday, I had the opportunity to run the new D&D 2024 Lich in a pretty good environment that I think fit how it's intended to run. I ran him as a solo monster. He was by himself. I gave him a little bit of terrain that it was essentially like not crazy terrain, but enough terrain that you had to think about where you were moving to in order to figure out how you were going to get to him. We had 4 characters. They were 14th level, 13th or 14th level when they ran it. So just about the right challenge rating mix. It was just right at that, like, it's going to be a hard encounter, but shouldn't be overwhelmingly deadly. I think it edged into deadly. So we're going to actually use the encounter calculator that I have available as part of the 5e artisanal database, again, available to patrons of Sly Flourish. 4 characters, 13th level, and we have a Lich. And in this case, we are going to do the 5.2 SRD Lich. Yes, and it says it is potentially deadly. It is not deadly because of the total monster CR. It is instead just on the edge of deadly because the monster has a CR of 21 and the potentially deadly single monster is 20. So it's within one level of being correct. So I think it was a really good close approximation of what we have. But I wanted to take a look at the 2014 Lich so that we could kind of compare them. So we're going to open up the both Liches. So here is the 2014 Lich that I had run multiple times. And one of the big issues that I had with the old Lich is the hit points were way low. 135 hit points at CR 21 is very, very low. And the trick that it had is it has this, so it's not even in this version of it. It's not even in the SRD one, but they had a lair action where they could sort of tether to somebody else and transfer damage done to them to the other person. And if you forgot to do that, the Lich just died super fast. The other one is you had all of these spell slots with all of these different things to remember, and that was pretty tough to run. And action economy wise, even though it had these legendary actions where it could do like paralyzing touch or cast a cantrip, cantrips just aren't powerful enough for the legendary actions to really offset it. So it actually made the Lich pretty hard to run. You had to remember to use particular abilities or else it totally got destroyed. Spell casting, you always had to kind of worry about what kind of spells it could cast. And you always wondered, like, are these the actual spells that I want the thing to be able to cast? And of course, back then, it didn't have any other actions other than spells that you had an expectation of running. So I've run Liches, but most of the time when I ran them, I've customized them myself, and then I would still screw up having run them because they're very complicated monsters, mostly because, like, look at all of the spells that you have to kind of keep track of to decide what the Lich is going to do. There were other versions of Liches in the D&D 2014 era. A Sararak, I wrote a whole article about a Sararak who was an Archlich, and they had a stat block for the Archlich, things like that. But now we have the 2024 Lich, and this is the one that I ran the other day. And immediately you'll notice, holy cow, hit points, 315. Well more than double the amount of hit points that the previous one had. Way easier. None of the weird thing about thresholding or about tethering to a character to do damage. 315 is a lot of hit points for this Lich to have. And a pretty high AC of 20. We're going to get to the AC in a minute. Saves are all very reasonable. It's interesting that it does have a couple of dumps, right? Like strength is a 0 and charisma is a 3. But it, of course, has legendary resistances. 4 if it's outside of its lair, 5 if it's in its lair. I don't think I came close to burning all of his legendary resistances. So it didn't really matter. And I didn't use what I typically have been replacing legendary resistance with dreadful blessings. Instead, I was like, for this kind of battle, I want to stick to like the rules that it's got and see how it goes. Then we get into the actions, and the actions is where there's a massive difference between the old Lich and the new Lich. The new one has a Eldritch Blast, makes 3 attacks using Eldritch Burst or Paralyzing Touch. Eldritch Burst is melee or range. It doesn't matter if you're standing right next to it or if it's super far away. In fact, I think how far does it go out? 120 feet, so really far, right? Really close, really far. Plus 12 to hit, very respectable attack bonus, and does 31 average damage with force damage. So that's pretty cool. Then it has a paralyzing touch, which does half the damage, but can inflict a paralyzing condition. And it can do it multiple times, right? And the paralyzing is automatic. If it hits you, you are paralyzed till the start of the Lich's next turn, right? It basically can, if it hits you, it's going to steal around. So that's kind of an important one. And we're going to get into like my one, I guess I have a few issues having run this monster now. But one of the big ones is the action denial aspect of this, or action denial, the taking away actions from the characters and you're really taking actions away from the players to be able to play. That's a problem that this Lich has. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But this is an example of one. I didn't even try this one, right? I never even did a paralyzing touch. I just hit them with Eldritch Burst. First of all, it's a ton of damage. 93 points of damage just from its normal attacks every round is a lot of damage. Right? Like, I mean, he was hammering people regularly, so I didn't feel like I had to do much there. But the paralyzing condition, unless there's like a really good reason why you would want to paralyze, otherwise it could get spammed and because it has no saving throw, it really can hurt, the player's ability to play, right? And I don't want monsters and lore and all that, really important, but I don't want to get in the way of playing, right? And I don't know, like this one, the paralyzing touch of a Lich is a very traditional aspect to the Lich. So I don't know that I'm bothered too much by it. Spellcasting, you can see its spellcast is way thinner, right? That it's got Detect Magic, Dispel Magic, Fireball, Invisibility, Lightning Bolt, Mage Hand, stuff like that. Animate Dead, Dimension Door, Plane Shift, Chain Lightning, Finger of Death, Power Word Kill, and Scrying, right? One thing I might have added here, if I'm going to modify, I didn't modify it. I ran it pretty close to as is. One of the things I would allow it to do is instead of doing one of its Eldritch Bursts, it ought to be able to cast an at-will spell. The advantage here is it could do things like 2 Eldritch Bursts and then a Fireball, right? It's a little bit more damage, but not tremendously more damage. But its ability to kind of use these things, like a Dispel Magic plus 2 bursts, I think that would make sense. I don't know that I would let it use all of them per day. I don't know why this is 1 per day. Oh, I guess it's 1 each per day. That's what that means. I don't know that I would let it do like it's, these big ones, Chain Lightning, Finger of Death, Power Word Kill. I don't know that I would let it do 2 bursts plus that. That feels like a lot. But I think certainly the at-will spells that it's got. Protective Magic. So as a reaction, the Lich can cast Counterspell or Shield in response to the spell's trigger, using the same spellcasting ability as its spellcasting ability. And it can do so at will. Right? It can cast Counterspell and Shield as often as it wants to. Its armor class is already pretty high at 20, right? And certainly, I think it's fair to have it using Shield when you have a lot of characters. Like if I had 5 or 6, I'd have been more likely to use Shield. With 4, I didn't use it. I never used this ability. I never used Protective Magic. And the reason why is it was action denial. That I would be taking away, first of all, 315 hit points. It was already plenty defended. And an AC 20 plus 315 hit points meant that it was already had more than enough to be able to withstand it. And it lasted a long time. It did a lot of damage. It was really scary. It actually killed one of the characters because of Power Word Kill. We'll get to that in a minute. The new Power Word Kill, by the way, is really good. But I was not going to have a counterspell, right? I did not want to counter the spells. We had 2 spellcasters. We had a cleric and a wizard. And they were throwing a lot of spells around. And I did not want to just eat their spells with Counterspell. So I did not use Counterspell and I did not use Shield. And because it just takes away stuff. They were already, 20 is already high. They were missing their attacks. And then every so often they get 22, 23. And I could have used Shield. And I chose not to because I felt like it would just be taking actions away. It would make the battle too much of a slog. And really did like just a downer. Right? It would just be, oh, great. I cast another spell and they counter my spell again, right? I'm burning all my spell slots on nonsense. And he doesn't have spell slots, so he can cast this as often as he wants. So that's one issue. The other issue is that the Eldritch Burst, and this did come up because the wizard, the player playing the wizard was like, can I counter that? Or didn't ask, like, I want to counter that. And I said, it won't matter. Or they were actually going to throw up a Globe of Invulnerability to protect against the spells that the Lich had. And I had to say to them, you know that the Eldritch Burst is not a spell. It's going to be able to pierce through that. And they said, oh, and I said, you can change your mind on this, right? You can change and not cast that spell. Because I'm not going to, this is when we're figuring out the mechanics of this stuff. And for them to realize like, oh, wait, those are not spells, right? That Eldritch Burst is not a spell. It is an ability that the Lich can do, and therefore it cannot be countered, and it cannot be circumvented with things like Global Vulnerability. Well, that kind of took away their agency a little bit too. My argument was, I won't counterspell you if you don't try to counterspell me, and also I'm going to win this because these guys don't. You can't really counter the spells that matter that much to the Lich. But that's an area where like the Lich is at an unfair advantage because of this stuff, right? Because caster characters don't have abilities like Eldritch Burst, which means the Lich can constantly be counterspelling them. But you can't counterspell the Lich's Eldritch Burst. It can just be blast, bam, 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 bam. Nor the Disrupt Life. The Disrupt Life is the same thing. We'll get into the legendary actions in here. So my response was, I'm just not going to use protective magic. If I wanted to add more defense to account for the shield, I would probably increase his armor class to like 22, right? I just say he has a flat 22 AC. And then not use shield. There is a little bit of a fun strategy of counterspelling versus shielding. And I think one way you could potentially run the Lich that would make it fun is telling the players that the Lich has an unlimited ability to counter and shield. And then they have to kind of decide how they're going to hit it to try to determine which one it's going to use. Because you could have it where like the melee people are at an advantage if the Lich counterspells somebody, because then they can't cast shield and then they're going to get hit more often. Likewise, if they cast shield, then they know that it's time to do your big spells. You can't capitalize off that. You can't get that advantage as a player if you don't know that's the case. So you might tell them or telegraph. I would probably just tell them, but telegraph to them, this Lich is definitely going to be casting Counterspell and Shield, and you're going to want to decide which one to try to trigger. And don't try to game it too much from the Lich's perspective. Like, do I want to counter that spell? Do I not want to counter that spell? That might be one way to run it. Frankly, in my case with 4 characters, I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to use the ability. So then we get to the legendary actions, which are kind of interesting. Deathly Teleport. Lich teleports 60 feet to an unoccupied space, and everybody around it takes 11 necrotic damage. 11's not really very much, but it's already dumping out a bunch of stuff. You might increase that. I don't think you'd be out of hand to increase it, to double it to 22 points of necrotic damage, just to kind of really shake things up. I think that would be okay. The Disrupt Life is really good. So Disrupt Life, con saving throw, DC 20. Each creature that isn't undead in a 20-foot emanation originating from the Lich, so it blows up around the Lich. That I actually screwed up. I did that at range. I'm just realizing now that I did that at range. I was letting it throw that out there like a fireball. And I don't know that really ruined it, right? But the idea that it explodes around it, right? And each creature that isn't an undead in a 20-foot emanation takes 31 necrotic damage, success half damage, failure success. Lich can't take this action again until the start of its next turn. Yeah, so I screwed that up by having to being able to throw those out there like a fireball. It was like a necrotic fireball. But it really helped, and that helped keep the threat of the thing out. Because 93 damage is a lot of damage, but it's CR 21, it's not crazy. Because I think when you cross CR 20 is when you can get to almost 10 damage per challenge rating, which would be 210 points of damage. This is getting it close, right? 93 damage plus 62. So you're in the 150 hit point of damage range. And then if you add the 11 necrotic damage, that's another 22. Now you're in the 160, 170 damage. That's about right? That's about the amount of damage that a CR 21 monster should be doing. Then you get to Frightening Gaze. So Frightening Gaze is a Lich cast Fear. I got multiple problems with this one. Oh my God, I'm right. As far as I'm concerned, I know I had arguments with people. Oh no, you don't need to list out the abilities. I was hindered by the fact that I had to go look up Fear in the player's handbook. And on the fly, because it was a legendary action, I did it too quickly. And I said, I think Fear is a single target at range. And no, it's not a single target at range. It's a cone. It's a 30-foot cone. So I had to go look it up after. I'll realize, oh God, I'd screwed up. It was a 30-foot cone. Just tell me what this does, right? Just put the stupid spell description in. Why are you making me look it up in the book? We've learned from this 10 years ago, 11 years ago, we learned that that's a real problem. People were complaining about it 11 years ago. Why are you not putting this thing in? I get it. For these other spells that you're you don't really expect that he's going to be using these spells during play, I'm totally good with those not having descriptions. You don't need to describe every spell. But if a spell is in something like Protective Magic, luckily, I know what Counterspell and Shield do, right? Although Counterspell I still have to look up because they changed it. But this one, Fear is a legendary action. Pain in the ass, right? Now I got to go look up what Fear does. And I got it wrong, right? And Look, I don't think I'm like the God Emperor of role-playing games and that I have like this incredible, beautiful mind. But I think it's fair to say that I'm well in the average of skill levels of RPG and particularly D&D GMs, right? I think it's fair to say that if you have a big Gaussian distribution of the skill levels of DMs, I'm probably somewhere in the middle. You might even argue that given that I've played it a long time and I've run probably 1,000 5e games, maybe I'm outside on the little edge of it. And I can't do this. I have to go look up books, right? Like that's too hard. So that's one problem. The other problem is when we actually look at fear. And the problem is that the fear spell, when it hits you, it's a high DC 20, right? Because you're using a spell save DC 20. Wisdom save is a 30-foot cone. Everybody in the cone has to make the save. And if you fail it, you are afraid of the target and you are going to use your move and your action to flee, right? And you don't get, it's not one round. It's until you make the save again, all of you are running away. So as a legendary action, one of 3 legendary actions that the Lich can do, it can make more than one person get hit by this and run away. And it's a wisdom saving throw. Now, there are lots of character abilities from different character classes when you start to get into this high level of play where they are immune to fear, right? There's fighters and barbarians and things like that have kind of fear immunity. The paladin has like fear immunity auras that it can do. But if it has those, then this spell is totally useless. It does nothing, right? If they manage to just avoid the fear, then the ability might not as well be there at all, right? But if it is affecting you, then it completely ruins your game because now your character's running away. You're not only not doing anything, but the thing you're doing is directly detrimental to the rest of the encounter. Oh man, I spent 3 rounds full running away, 60 feet around. I'm 180 feet. Now it's going to take me 180 feet to get back again. That just sucks, right? That just sucks. So what would I do? Right, what would I do? So I would replace the frightening gaze with instead like a shriek of undeath or a howl of undeath. And the howl of undeath, you could still make it a cone, right? You could still say it's a 30-foot cone. You could still have it be a DC 20 wisdom saving throw. But instead of having it make the character run away, you say that all enemies have advantage on attacks against that enemy until the end of the Lich's next turn. Right? And now it's scary without action removal. Oh my God. Now all the monsters have advantage to hit me, right? My defense is broken and now they have advantage to hit me. Critical hits are going to happen more often. Different monsters could hit you. Really scary, but doesn't take your actions away. And it cannot be affected by the fear removal stuff. You could even say it's a fear effect so that if they do have some way to avoid fear, they might be able to get away from that. But I don't know. I might not even do that because, that idea. Yeah, somebody brings that up, like the rattled condition from A5E could do it too. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what rattled does, but something like that. I don't think that I would say that it have disadvantage on attacks. You might do something like that. It has disadvantage on attacks. If you feel, if you're looking at your group and you're like, they're really strong on attacks, that might be one thing you could do. But I think that also is a little bit of action removal. On the other hand, then they have a reason to get advantage on the attack so they can get back to a normal attack. So you could do one of those. You could do both of those if you're feeling really mean, right? That like DC 20 wisdom saving throw on a failure, attacks against you have advantage and your attacks are at disadvantage, right? You could do something like that. But it's better than fear because at least I didn't take your actions away. You can still move, you can still attack, you can still do your other stuff. I think that works better. I like the idea that you can hinder a character without taking their actions away. And I feel like this Lich stat block did a lot to take actions away. Both the 2 big areas are that frightening gaze is one, and the protective magic of counterspelling and shield felt like another. You're taking a lot of actions away from the characters or removing their actions when you use all those. So that's my experience with Lich. If I'm running it again, there's probably a few things I would do. The main things I would do, I'd probably give it a +2 bonus to its attack. I would still have that conversation with the players of like, if you don't counterspell me, I won't counterspell you. In this case, he fingered to death. I'm sorry, he didn't do finger death. He did power word kill. And he did power word kill on one of the characters. The new power word kill is really good. The power word kill kills characters if they have 100 or fewer hit points and does 12d12 necrotic damage if they have higher than 11. So it's the power word kill now does damage to you even if you have more than 100 hit points, which I really like. And there was a fun circumstance where one of the players tried to counterspell it, but it was so high they couldn't do it. I thought that was kind of interesting. And I think it would have been interesting for them to be able to counterspell Power Word Kill anyway. But generally, one of the kind of loose house rules I have is like, look, I'll make you a deal. If you don't counterspell me, I don't counterspell you, right? Because I'll win out, right? The Lich is going to win out on a counterspell battle, How about, and especially because it doesn't burn a spell slot. So the Lich can counterspell and cast spells on the same turn. Right, I would do that. So I probably, instead of the shield and counterspell, I give it plus. I might give it advantage on magic saves. I don't think it has that anyway. Right, so you might give it advantage to magical saves versus magical effects. That would count. That would have sort of changed the counterspell feature. Give it +2 to AC, and then I would change the frightening gaze into this same kind of thing, a cone that goes out, but instead grants advantage on attack rolls against them, or grants them disadvantage on attack rolls, or both. I think maybe both. It's a Lich, right? This is CR21. So those are the things I would do. So those are my experiences with the Lich. I hope that you find that useful. If you are coming to run a Lich yourself, maybe you get some insights into what the Lich was actually like and some thoughts about how you want to modify it. Number one thing is you are totally in your rights to modify anything for your game. So if you want to modify, there's nothing that requires that you run the Lich as is. You can always tune the monsters in every other aspect of your game to suit what you think fits your goals and the enjoyment of the players and the feeling of your game. You should always feel free to do those. Every quarter on the Sly Flourish Patreon, we have the Patreon Q&A. Every patron once a month can ask a question, RPG-related question there. Every Friday, I answer every question that is asked, and then some of those questions I bring here to the show so that we can dive in deeper. Rain V says, for about 7 months now, my time has been stretched thin between renovating our home, transitioning between jobs, and running our household. I'm finally in a place where the pace of life is leaving me a sliver of air to breathe, but I don't see our busy schedule calming down to the point where I can actually run D&D in the near future. What are some ways to consume and experience a little bit of D&D when your schedule just simply doesn't allow for the full experience? Good question, and something I think about a lot. So I'm going to have a lot of options here. I wrote down a list of a bunch of potential things that you could do. Not all of them will be possible. Not all of them will be things that you want to do. So hopefully one or two of them are things like, yeah, that's something I could do. One is solo gaming. Solo gaming and journaling gaming are both really fun. 1,000 Year Vampire, Iron Sworn, Shadowdark Solo. There's a bunch of different games. There's the solo toolkit available on DM's Guild. There's a lot of ways to kind of, get out your dice and get out your stuff and play some RPG stuff on your own, just to kind of get your imagination going. I think it's really good GM cross-training. The idea of solo RPGs is really good GM cross-training. Great way to kind of get your thought on. But another possibility is a one-on-one game. I love one-on-one games. I haven't run one-on-one games in a little while because I've been running 3 other RPGs, so I'm pretty good on being able to run games. But during COVID, my wife and I ran a one-on-one game. Back when Dragon of Icespire Peak came out, my friend Newbie DM and I both played a one-on-one game. You can find videos for that. And I really like one-on-one games. So finding someone else, it's much faster to play. You can play in under an hour, and you can really focus a story down. Something that I've heard from people who have played one-on-one games is even after I had told them, they were shocked at how much of the story you can focus around one character and how much that changes the game, because you don't have to kind of worry about all of the characters' different backgrounds and motivations. You're worried about just one of them. So that works really well. There are a couple of solo games in the new Dragon Delves book that Wizards of the Coast just published. So that's, you can take a look at those. But one-on-one games are another way to kind of slide some D&D in if your spouse is willing to play, or you have a child that wants to play with you, or you have another friend that you want to play with. One-on-one games is a great way to play. I haven't really spent too much time investigating it, but play-by-post games is another option. There are a few different places where you can find play-by-post games. Different message forums and different Discord servers have play-by-post games. And that gives you an opportunity to kind of play a game asynchronously, right? You can kind of do your turn. You can kind of read up on what everybody else did as you're able to play. Of course, you want to make sure the pace is up. I haven't really tried them, so I can't speak too much to how well they work or offer any kind of tips or anything like that. But play by post games may be another way to get your game in. Going to gaming conventions. If there are local gaming conventions, or you're able to kind of afford going to one of the gaming conventions far away, that's a good way, maybe once or twice a year, to kind of get away and go and enjoy it. You might look for local gaming conventions. They're often, we ran into conventions that were like 4 or 5 tables of people that got together. Definitely go to your local game shop, see if they have sort of a play day where they get together, and see if you can slide away to go play at one of your games. And then you might go there and you might say, hey, can I offer to run a game? Right? You don't have to do it all the time, but you can do it sometimes. There are online games. Baldman, who runs the organized play programs for Wizards of the Coast, they have like weekend games that you can get onto by getting in the Baldman Games server. There's also Start Playing Games where it's for pay, it's for hire, but you can join games there and play regularly. That's another way to do it. But there are also online conventions that you can find from time to time where you can sort of jump in a game. And they can be hit or miss, right? It's very dependent on the GM you get, very dependent on the rest of the group that you get. So lots of questions that are there. Some other things you can do is listen and watch live play games. I think there's a huge amount of people who I consider to be in the hobby who don't actually play. And some people are like, oh my God, how can you be in the hobby and not play? I don't think that we should delegitimize the value of being part of the RPG community by listening and watching live play. I think that's just fine, right? I think the only difference between somebody listening to a live play game and playing the game is they don't really roll dice, right? They don't have their own character and they don't roll dice. But like the whole rest of the game is kind of the same because it's you listening to a bunch of players and a GM talking through their story, right? You don't get to have a direct effect in it, but you get to listen to everybody else playing, kind of similar to the way a more quiet player would be playing at a game where a lot of different things are going on at the game with all the other players. So I know lots of people obviously enjoy it. It's very, very popular. And the nice thing about that is you can stop and start whenever you want. You could put it on a podcast and listen to it while you're doing the dishes, right? Or mowing the lawn or whatever. You can listen to your live play game. So I think being involved in live play stuff is a fine way to be tied to the community if you're into that. Some people just don't dig it. And that's cool too. You don't have to dig it. The other one that I'll bring up is video games. So obviously Baldur's Gate 3 is a full D&D 5th edition based video game, but I really love Solasta. So I just played Solasta. I played through the main game and the expansion game. And it really gave me that D&D feel, particularly as a player. I don't get to play very often at all. So for me to play a group of characters going through that game was really fun. It was really fun to kind of, work on the character abilities and kind of get my head around the character personalities and engage in the story and play around with stuff. I learned a lot of things about playing, like, wow, attunement really limits your magic items, right? Like that was something that I knew from a GM perspective, but I really didn't recognize. So I was like, man, I've got bags full of really good magic items, but I can only pick 3. That was really interesting. So I think video games are another way. That video games are how I got involved in D&D in the first place. I played Pool of Radiance, the Gold Box Pool of Radiance game as a kid. And that got me interested enough to start to figure out how to play it as a tabletop game. But I really enjoy the video game aspects. And then of course there are video games that are outside of, 5e and D&D, but you can also play the Pathfinder video games and they're still kind of, D20 enough to be enjoyable. And there's some really good Pathfinder games out there too. And then I'm playing Candela Obscura, which is definitely more of like a Final Fantasy style game, but it's definitely giving me my role-playing game drive. The Claire Obscure Expedition 33 is not a D&D style game, but it is a role-playing game, and it is a lot of fun, both from the story, which is crazy. The story is bananas. And the gameplay is really interesting. I'm starting to kind of get into the crunchier aspects of the gameplay and are enjoying that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So those are a few ideas. And of course, talking about it, going on the forums, hitting through ideas, kind of playing around with campaign ideas for things you might want to run. You can do all that sort of stuff. They used to refer to this as the lonely fun of D&D. I don't really, I feel like that's a detriment, but really fun stuff. So hopefully, Ren, that gives you some ideas of the things that you can do. Lindsay C. says, I'm about to start GMing Daggerheart with a new group. The plan is to do a couple of short adventures, including the quick start, and if we all like it, maybe extend into a campaign. I've been thinking of offering a few different styles for the campaign if it happens, including the Witherwild campaign frame, outdoor naturally, or else doing something with City of Arches, urban, or Grendleroot, underground. Do you have any tips or know of any resources that would help me convert your 5e content to Daggerheart? So this gets into a really interesting question of what it takes to convert some source material to another system. I actually have an article that I wrote back a couple of years ago now. Yeah, it's actually almost exactly more than a couple of years ago, called Converting Adventures Between Systems. I will link to this down in the show notes. And converting between systems kind of talks about, it's a little long. It's a lengthy article for some simple ideas. Could use some editing. I might complain about my article. Anyway, you can find it there. And one of the things I try to think about is like, well, when can't you convert material? So the ones you brought up 2 of mine, right? So I can certainly talk to those. City of Arches and Ruins of the Grendleroot. Ruins of the Grendleroot, the setting area and even the adventures should be pretty easy to convert to just about anything, right? My assumption is that you are running some kind of fantasy role-playing game and that the role-playing game generally follows the model of having a GM and multiple players. But beyond that, it should be very reskinnable. right? That it should be, could you run it with Dragonbane? I think so, right? I don't see why you couldn't. Could you run it with 13th Age? Yeah. Could you run it with Daggerheart? Yes. Can you run it with Shadowdark? Yes. Can you run it with any of the versions of 5e? Yes. Really, when I look at a product and say this is going to be a hard product to convert to something else, is when it's mostly focused on the mechanics. So this is when I talk about, how when I get a source book, when I get like a world source book, I'm not crazy about having a lot of subclasses or a lot of monsters and a lot of other stuff, because I may want to run it in a system that isn't the system that it used. And a book like the Midgard World book, which was actually designed to be played with both Pathfinder and D&D 5e. I think it originally started as a Pathfinder book. If it's workable with Pathfinder and 5e, well, now it's workable with D&D 4th edition or 2nd edition, right? And certainly D&D 2024, like the book still works because it's mostly lore and setting and adventure ideas and NPCs and all of the things that aren't tied to mechanics. So what I would do, as far as what you do for conversion, is pretty straightforward. That's where this article is pretty useful. One is make sure that there isn't a huge mismatch between the system you're running and the theme of the setting that you're running. And even then, it has to be pretty extreme. For example, City of Arches is kind of bright and optimistic, as is Deep Delver's Enclave and Grendleroot. These are bright and optimistic kind of areas. That doesn't mean you couldn't run them with Shadowdark, right? Shadowdark would still work. And even things like Shadow of the Demon Lord, right? You could run Shadow of the Demon Lord in either of those settings. You just change the theme. In fact, I talk about it in City of Arches, how to change the theme to make it kind of darker and grim versus the sort of happier, sunnier people at coffee shops enjoying their day, right? But you can make those changes, but there's sometimes where the theme and the setting are not really going to work well together. And that case, you probably don't want to draw that match. But I think even then you could do a lot. Understanding how the challenge system and the action resolution system work in the game you're running can help you understand what you might need to convert if you have to convert anything. This is saying, does it have a DC ladder? Is there a difficulty class for figuring things out? And if the system that you're trying to convert from uses a lot of that stuff, then you're going to have to know, I know that's high or medium or low. It really helps if you understand the underlying system of the supplement you're trying to convert, so that you know what easy, medium, or hard stuff is, and you know that you can convert it to your new system. But otherwise, you just convert it, right? You just, instead of looking at what's in the book, you instead know that, for me, I'm running Shadowdark, and that has 9, 12, 15, and 18, not 10, 15, 20. For their DC ladders, right? Or I don't even know, Pathfinder's is crazy, right? Pathfinder goes really, really high. Then some of the other stuff is like reskinning monsters. And in this case, I think rather than trying to look at a monster and say, I'm going to have to rebuild a new monster, it's far easier to take a monster in the system that you're planning to run and just use that monster instead. For City of Arches and for Ruins of the Grendleroot, I used almost entirely 5.1, 5.2 SRD monsters, right? The City of Arches, we actually used monsters from multiple SRDs. Or I think we stuck to the SRD for Level Up Advanced 5e, which has monsters you might not be familiar with. But all you do is think about the theme of that monster, think about what challenge rating it is. And again, it's assuming that you're using a system that uses challenge rating. If not, figure out whatever the difficulty tiers are for the monsters that you have and say, what kind of difficulty tier was this monster generally expecting? And then find a monster that fits and use that. And you can either run it directly or you can reskin it. So the main thing is take the mechanics that exist for whatever you're trying to convert and mostly throw it out and replace it with the mechanics of your existing system. And to me, the sources that work best for this are the ones that use mechanics in the source a lot less, which is why City of Arches, for example, has very little actual 5th edition material in it, right? 5th edition was sort of the core. But you're not going to find a lot of difficulty class descriptions. You're going to find a lot of monster descriptions, but those are very easily reskinnable. So it's a lot of times when you're looking at the City of Arches, you see a monster description, you try to find, you think about what that would be from the new system that you're getting at, like Daggerheart. Daggerheart has a ton of monsters in it, right? You have lots of things that you can grab and just reskin those. So the main thing is don't hang on, and I say this all the time, but I think it's important here too. Don't hang on too tightly. Right? When you have a new source book that you want to convert to, Ruins of the Grendleroot or City of Arches or Midgard or whatever, right? Or Theros. Let's say you really love Mythic Odyssey of Theros, but you don't want to run 5e. You would want to run it with Daggerheart instead. just hang on loosely, right? Hang on to the themes, hang on to the ideas, focus on the lore, focus on the adventures and the campaign setting and the feeling, and don't worry about the mechanics. You don't have to convert subclasses over. You don't have to convert monsters over. You don't have to, backgrounds, you might take the theme of a background and move it to whatever the background system of your system, but essentially just kind of wash the mechanics away and use the mechanics of your other system. It is by far the easiest way to convert an old thing to a new thing. And I think when you do that, it's really hard to find supplements that you cannot use and reskin pretty easily with whatever your system of choice is. So I hope that helps. Friends, I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today where we talked about all things in tabletop role-playing games. If you enjoyed this show and you want more stuff like this, the best thing you can do is to subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It is absolutely free to sign up. You get a free adventure generator for signing up, and you get a free weekly RPG-related article sent directly to your inbox. You can also join the Sly Flourish Patreon. Patrons get access to things like the 5e Artisanal database. The Hero Tier subscribers get a whole dedicated podcast. They get access to the whole City of Arches, Key of Worlds scenario set. Lots of stuff you get for being a patron of Sly Flourish. It's a tremendously good deal. And you get access to our dedicated Discord server where we talk about RPG stuff all throughout the week. And most of all, you help me put on shows like this. So thank you for that support. And you can pick up any of my books, including City of Arches, Ruins of the Grendleroot, Forge of Foes, and more at the Sly Flourish bookstore. Links for all of that are in the show notes. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Get out there and play an RPG.